UFC Fight Night Paris, France. Renato Moicano, Benoit, Saint-Denis, main event the Accor Arena this Saturday, and this 14-fight card after a week off from the UFC. Obviously, last 2 weeks ago, we had the Sphere. Last week, a week off. We are back for UFC Fight Night Paris, and now, we didn't have a UFC card last week, but we still had some MMA on the channel as well. We did pretty well as a whole on MMA last week. We went 13 for 15 on the picks, only getting 2 wrong on PFL Mana, and sweeping the full 5 on the Contender Series, looking for some more success this week with UFC Paris. And folks, if you have not yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Later this week, we will have multiple different prediction videos here on the channel. Tomorrow, we'll have our PFL Europe predictions, Stevie Ray and Lewis Long main event that card. And yes, Roger Huerta, the former UFC name who Dana White once coined the next big thing, is on this card. I believe Roger Huerta was the guy on Sports Illustrated. I think he was. But yes, he's on the PFL card. He's that guy. The guy who looks like he's in a midlife crisis. Yeah. That's actually happening. I can't believe it. Also later this week we'll have our NFL predictions along with our college football predictions as we get on to the Contender Series. And here we go. This is not the Contender Series, but this is again, I believe this is what, the 5th week of the Contender. Is it 5 or 6? This is 7. Wow. Okay, so only 4 more Contender Series left here on the year. We're gonna start with our first fight here. Rose Conceição, I probably butchered that, versus Alexia Fayanara. Probably butchered that one too. We are gonna go with Rose to win this fight. Now, 2 Brazilian strawweight fighters here. I'm going to take Rose. She's been fighting in LFA. She's fought the better competition. For Alexia, she's beating 9-6 fighters. You know, fighters who are 0-1, 3-1. I'm not too impressed. I think Rose is a better jiu-jitsu player. She's fought better competition coming from LFA. I think she should win this fight. If I'm not mistaken, she's the LFA champion currently. Give me Rose to win the fight by unanimous decision. Next up, Kevin Vallejos taking on Cam Teague. Vallejos is 23 years old. He's 13-1 from Argentina. You got Teague, who is 7-0 here from Mobile, Alabama, and he is coming off a victory over Austin Lingo just a month ago. Obviously a former UFC name in Lingo and Fury FC, but other than that, Cam Teague has not beaten anybody. Look at his wins: 2-8 Corey Jenkins, 2-1 CJ Henney, 2-3 fighter making the professional mixed martial arts debut, with the exception of the Lingo fight, which, don't get me wrong, is a very good victory, beating Lingo by TKO. He has not beat a single soul who is, you know, worth something of note in mixed martial arts. I'm taking Vallejos to win this fight. He lost to Gene Silva last year, obviously the Fighting Nerds fighter in Silva last year on the Contender. He's come back. He's won 2 fights since then. Excuse me, he's only 22 years old. I think I said he was 23 earlier. Only 22 years old. I expect him to go out here and get a knockout in the first round. I expect him to get the UFC contract as well. Give me the Argentinian to win by first round knockout. Next up, we've got Kevin Christian taking on Francisco Mezo. We're going to go with the 8-2 Kevin Christian to win the fight. Just the experience is on his side, taking on a guy with only 4 professional mixed martial arts fights. One of them is a DQ victory, so really only 3 true MMA wins, at least professionally, for Mezo, who has been fighting in Cage Warriors, which again is not a bad regional at all. It's probably one of the better regionals you can fight in prior to the UFC. But he's taking on Kevin Christian here, a guy who has fought in LFA before. Given the guys he has fought prior to his last LFA fight are a little bit iffy, because he fought 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. That's a little weird, I'm not gonna lie. I'm going to ever so slightly, though, side with Christian to win the fight. He has been in the game for longer, even though, yes, he had a 5-year layoff. And he is coming off a victory in LFA. I'm gonna trust on him to win this fight by, we'll go first round knockout in the light heavyweight division. Next up, Vadim Kutsi takes on Daniel Frunza in this fight. We're gonna go with the 17-1 fighter from Belarus in Vadim Kutsi to win the fight. We're gonna take him to win this one by second round TKO. He is 33 years old, which again, Dana White is going to say if Kutsi wins this fight. I'm not looking for 33-year-old contenders, but again, that doesn't matter as long as he wins this fight impressively, and I think he will. He's taking on a guy in Daniel Frunza here who's 8-2. He has won back-to-back fights in LFA, but for Vadim Kutsi, again, the experience is on his side. He's looked very good in fighting in promotions such as Brave. I like him to go out here and win this fight. I'm going to take him by second round TKO. As we go on to our main event, Bailey Schoenfelder, probably butchered that, taking on Danilo, the Ukrainian heavyweight here. Bailey should win this fight. He should win it pretty easily. He's taken on nothing but a can crusher. Bailey's coming off a victory over, oh God, who did he just beat? He beat Greg Velasco, who was on the Contender Series last year and lost to Shamil Gaziv. And again, Bailey won that fight by knockout in CFFC. The wins before that aren't the most impressive. He's fought in Bellator before, but when you look at Danilo Vyodkin from the Ukraine, yeah, a win over a 1-0 guy, a 12-53 guy, a 2-2 guy, a 0-0 guy, and a 7-6 fighter. That's all I need to see. We're taking Bailey to win the fight and to earn the UFC contract as well. We start things off here in the lightweight division with Balaji Oki taking on Chris Duncan. Oki 9-1 as a professional, coming off a split decision victory over Timmy Komba in his last fight by unanimous decision on that Hermanson Pfeiffer card in February of last year, or of this year, excuse me. Wasn't a crazy performance by Oki. I'll be honest, I was expecting a little bit more, but he went out there, got the win. I thought he won it. The split decision, it is what it is, but I thought Oki won that fight. He's now getting Chris Duncan, the Scottish fighter, who is 3-1 so far in the UFC. He's got the loss to Manuel Torres' last fight where he got subbed in the first round, beat a one-armed Yanal Ashmoz, beat Omar Morales, beat Charlie Campbell on the Contender series. Excuse me, he's 2-1 in the UFC. That Campbell win is against the UFC name, but it's in the Contender, just like his fight against Vishlev Borshev on the Contender series back in 2021. Chris Duncan's not bad. Again, he's going to mix up the striking and the wrestling a pretty fair amount in his fights. That's what he has done recently in the UFC. Even in his loss to Manuel Torres, again, there was a takedown by Chris Duncan involved. In the Yanal Ashmoz fight, again, mixed up the wrestling and the striking as well. Same thing can be said about the Omar Morales victory. He's had a bunch of close fights so far in the UFC. I guess his 2 wins were somewhat... the Yanal Ashmoz fight, again, he won that fight against a one-armed Ashmoz, but the fight against Omar Morales was relatively close. Again, got beat pretty quickly in the Manuel Torres fight. He's taken on the Zulu Warrior here in Balaji Oki, who got his UFC contract by winning on the Contender series against Dylan Salvador, winning that fight by first-round knockout. And again, I expected him to run right through Timmy Kwamba. It didn't happen. Again, it was a pretty, evenly matched fight, at least it appeared. Again, I thought Oki got the nod, and I thought he did well enough to win the fight. I thought he won the first and the third rounds. But again, it was a fight that Oki was definitely expected to go out there and run right through Timmy Kwamba, especially a guy getting that fight on somewhat short notice. It was originally supposed to be Oki taking on Damir Hadzovic, which was another fight that, again, Oki was going to just run right through. But again, he came out with the victory, against Timmy Kwamba, but didn't look again that great in doing so. He outstruck Kwamba in the first and third rounds. The second round was relatively close. I think that's fine though. Again, he took on a fighter on short notice. At the same time, again, we're talking about how Kwamba took the fight on short notice, but again, Oki did at the same time too. Wasn't preparing for a guy in Kwamba and still came out there and picked up the victory. I think he should be fine in this fight with Chris Duncan. Again, Duncan doesn't really blow me away with anything that he does. I think Oki is just the better fighter. When you look at this fight again, Chris Duncan will probably threaten some with the wrestling. He is going to be willing to engage in a striking battle back and forth with Oki. But that being said, again, I do think Oki's got the better hands. I think he's got more power, and I think it's going to be real tough for Chris Duncan to win this fight. I think, again, if Duncan wins this one, he's going to have to mix it up. He's going to have to make Oki wondering what he's going to do in this fight. Because, again, I would say Duncan's wrestling is going to be his biggest advantage in this fight. Not because Oki's wrestling's all that bad in his own right, but just because, again, I think Oki's got the better hands. I think he's got the quicker hands, and I think he's got more power, too. With, again, all that being said, that's why Duncan needs to find a way to get this fight down to the ground. I don't think he's able to. Again, we saw Timmy Kwamba have a little bit of success wrestling against Oki, but even in the round that he won, he went 1-for-4 in his takedowns against Oki. Other than that, in the fight, if you take out the one takedown Kwamba got in the second round, again, or even if you include it, I don't know what point I'm trying to make here. He went 1-for-6 on his takedowns. Kwamba went 1-for-6 on his takedowns in that fight. I think Oki should be fine. I understand Duncan is a little bit higher level than Kwamba is, but at the same time, I think Balaji Oki should be able to keep the fight standing, and I think he should be able to go out there and get a finish early in this fight against Chris Duncan. I'm going to go with the Zulu Warrior, Balaji Oki, to win the fight by first round knockout. Again, he's the better striker. He's got the better hands, and he should be able to go out here and pick up the victory pretty quickly against the Scottish Chris Duncan. So give me Balaji Oki to win the fight by first round knockout. As we go on to our next one here in the bantamweight division, we've got Nora Cornolle taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Cavalcanti just fought 3 weeks ago. She beat Josiane Nunes by split decision. It was a close fight. I thought probably Cavalcanti won the fight, even though I picked Nunes to win the fight. I thought Cavalcanti barely got the edge in that one, but still, she's going to turn around really quickly and take on Nora Cornolle. Cornolle, who was originally supposed to take on a former UFC champion, believe it or not, on this card, in Jeraine Durandamy. Yep, that was supposed to happen on the prelims, by the way. I mean, I guess. But Cornolle now gets Cavalcanti instead in this one. Interesting fight on paper, again, because both these fighters, one loss so far in their professional mixed martial arts career. For Cornolle, again, comes outside the UFC in her first professional mixed martial arts fight, in her first fight with Jacqueline Cavalcanti back in 2021. For Cavalcanti, her loss comes on the PFL Challenger Series against Martina Jindrova back in 2022. That fight was at 155 pounds, though, again, because the PFL at the time did not have or they still don't have a 135-pound division. They didn't even have a 145-pound division back then when Cavalcanti fought in the Challenger Series against Jindrova. Again, she lost the fight by split decision. These two, again, did fight all the way back in 2021. It was Cavalcanti's second ever fight. It was Nora Cornolle's first ever fight. Again, that's a long time. It's 2021. It's been 3 years since that date now. And now you get, again, Cavalcanti, who's 2-0 in the UFC with victories over Nunes and Zara Farron, and Nora Cornolle, who is 2-0 in the UFC with victories over Melissa Mullins and Jocelyn Edwards. I thought Nora Cornolle looked really good in her first fight, in her first finish in the UFC when she beat Melissa Mullins. I thought it was a really good performance. She went out there, finished Mullins in the second round. The fight before that, again, she lost. She beat Josiane Nunes. And I think Cornolle's striking has been pretty solid so far in the UFC. Cavalcanti is going to be willing to strike with her as well. It's pretty much who you think the better striker is will probably win this fight. I think slightly it is Nora Cornolle. And I understand, again, Cavalcanti has beat Cornolle in the past. Again, though, that was Cornolle's first ever fight. It was Cavalcanti's second fight. A lot has changed since then. You get Cornolle at home in France. I think she's just the better striker. Josiane Nunes had opportunities where she was, beating Jacqueline Cavalcanti on the feet. Again, Cavalcanti barely got the nod, but there were spots in that fight where Nunes was winning striking-wise, and I think Cornolle should be able to exploit that. I think Cornolle should go in there and should be able to win in spots on the feet against Cavalcanti, enough to the point where she wins the fight by unanimous decision. Again, you got to take everything into account in this one. This fight is in France. It's in Cornolle's hometown or home country. Cavalcanti coming over from Portugal for this fight. I think, again, Cornolle is the better striker. I think she should have the striking advantage and she should win the fight. So give me Cornolle to win. I understand she's 34 years old, which isn't necessarily ideal for women's bantamweight, but I do think she goes out here and picks up the victory. Give me Nora Cornolle to win the fight by unanimous decision. We go on to our next one here in the flyweight division. We have got Daniel Barez taking on Victor Altamirano. Barez is 0-1 in the UFC, and he's 35 years old, about to turn 36 in the flyweight division. That's never good. And I understand Barez has only had one fight in the UFC, but being that old at 125 pounds really doesn't favor you all that much, if we're being honest. For Victor Altamirano, again, this is a guy who has traded wins and losses in the UFC. He's 2-3 so far in the promotion. They lost to Carlos Hernandez, a win over Daniel Lacerda, and a win over Vinicius Salvador after that. Back-to-back losses since the Salvador fight, with the Tim Elliott loss and the Felipe Dos Santos loss. Altamirano's been all right in the UFC, right? He's, in his last fight against Felipe Dos Santos, it was a wrestling-heavy approach. He wasn't really able to do much with his takedowns. It was a very close fight. I thought Altamirano probably should have got the nod, but again, where Altamirano really worked well in that fight was with his wrestling. He had 9 takedowns against Felipe Dos Santos in that fight. The fight before that for Altamirano, though, got a huge step up in competition from guys like Salvador and Daniel Lacerda. He got to fight Tim Elliott on the main card of Kai Kara France and Amir Albazi that fight night back in June of 2023. Lost the fight by decision. Tim Elliott was able to go out there and out-wrestle Altamirano in that one. It was just simply put a levels fight. Before that for Altamirano, again, the wins over Lacerda and Salvador, and then his first fight in the UFC was a split decision loss to Carlos Hernandez, a fight that I thought personally Altamirano won, but it is what it is. You now get Altamirano versus Daniel Barez. And for Daniel Barez, it was kind of an interesting signing to the UFC. This is a guy who lost on the Contender Series back in 2021 to Carlos Hernandez. Since then, he won 4 fights in the regionals, but against a 10-9-1 guy, against a 7-9 fighter, against a 6-9 fighter, and then against a 14-12 fighter. He gets signed to the UFC to take on Jafel Filo. He loses the fight by first-round arm triangle choke, and now here he is on this France card against Victor Altamirano. I think Altamirano is just the better fighter. Barez might be better in spots on the feet, but where Altamirano should easily win this fight is on the ground. Altamirano is the far superior grappler. He is the far superior wrestler. And again, I understand Jafel Filo is a very good grappler in his own right, so I'm not expecting Altamirano to go out there and, completely mop the floor with Daniel Barez in terms of grappling. But again, I think the advantage on the ground does go to the Mexican fighter fighting out of Fort Worth, Texas, in Victor Altamirano. And again, Barez is old for the flyweight division. 35 years old is not young at all. I understand Altamirano's 33 in his own right, but it's tough to be 35, about to turn 36 at 125 pounds. Again, it deteriorates your speed. It's tough. You are slower. It's harder to make that weight at that age, at 35 years old. I think it's difficult. And again, I am not blown away with Barez at all. I understand, again, he took the fight with Fialho on somewhat short notice. But Fialho took him down pretty easily, got the arm triangle choke and finished him. I'm expecting Altamirano to be able to go to the well multiple times in terms of the takedowns, and I think he should be able to go in there and just dominate the fight on the ground. I'm not expecting a submission by Altamirano, but I do just think he's the better grappler. And when we're looking at this fight again, Altamirano is a guy who at one point was fighting Tim Elliott with the chance to break into the top 15, and now he's taking on a guy who's 0-1 in the UFC, getting his second fight in Daniel Barez at 35 years of age. Yeah, I think Victor Altamirano should be able to win this fight. Again, he just had a close fight with Felipe dos Santos that he arguably won, and before that, he lost to Tim Elliott. Those are his only losses in the UFC. I thought he got robbed against Carlos Hernandez back in 2022. I think Altamirano by far should be the favorite to win this fight. He is an underdog on the books right now. As you take a look at the odds on the screen again, Altamirano plus 100, Perez minus 120. You can see that line fluctuate a little bit as Altamirano, I believe on some books, is plus 115. I think Altamirano should be able to win this fight. I think the wrestling is where he takes over. He's just the better grappler than Daniel Barez, and I think Altamirano should be able to win it by unanimous decision. We go back to the bantamweight division here with Aline Perez taking on Daria Zheleznyakova. This is one of the fights of all time, I guess. It's just I don't know. Aline Perez obviously is not most well known for her fighting abilities. She's probably most well known for what she does after the fights. If you don't know what I'm talking about, literally just watch any Aline Perez post-fight interview. You'll understand. She's taking on Daria Zheleznyakova, who is 1-0 in the UFC, but has a victory over Montserrat Rendon, who I don't think is that great of a UFC fighter. For Aline Perez, she is 10-2 as a pro, 3-1 in the UFC, with her only loss in the UFC being her first fight to Stephanie Egger, where she got submitted in the second round. Since then, 3 straight wins over the likes of Ashley Evans-Smith, where she beat her by unanimous decision, beat Lucia Cutelaba, and beat Jocelyn Edwards as well in her last fight in New Jersey at UFC 302. And Perez looked pretty good in the Jocelyn fight, right? Aline Perez's striking is getting better. Obviously, she came into the UFC and started out her UFC run really dominating with her wrestling and with her grappling. But again, as seen in her last fight against Jocelyn Edwards, the striking is improving as well, as she was able to knock down Edwards in that fight as well. For Daria Zheleznyakova, again, this is a fighter who's 9-1 as a pro. Her only loss comes back in 2022 in a pretty good one-round fight against Melissa Mullins back in Aries FC in 2022. It's a pretty good fight. But she loses that fight to Mullins, wins one in Aries after that, and then gets the call to the UFC to take on Montserrat Rendon on a Hibas Namajunas UFC Apex fight card. It was kind of a random signing. I thought she was supposed to fight Tainara Lisboa before that in the UFC. Withdrew from the fight, then ended up fighting Rendon later, or I guess in the next year in 2024. The Rendon fight, it wasn't anything that's going to blow you away from Zheleznyakova. Nothing really, it wasn't that masterful of a performance. Rendon was able to take her down a couple times, but Zheleznyakova, again, was the better striker in that fight, and that's what did push her to victory. Montserrat Rendon, I don't think is very good. I understand she beat Tamaris Vidal in her first fight in the UFC, but again, that's Tamaris Vidal. Not too high on Montserrat Rendon. I'm not too high on Daria Zheleznyakova. I think Aline Perez will have a lot of success wrestling Daria Zheleznyakova in this fight. And even on the feet, too, I think Aline Perez is able to remain competitive enough. I don't think she's able to purely out-kickbox Zheleznyakova in this one, just because, again, the Russian fighter is a better kickboxer. That is her background. But in terms of the grappling, in terms of the wrestling, this should be all Aline Perez. And I understand why Daria Zheleznyakova is on this card. She trains in France. It makes sense. But again, Montserrat Rendon was able to take down Zheleznyakova 3 times. For about 6 minutes of control. That's how Rendon won the first round in that fight. I'm expecting that to happen in this one, and Aline Perez to just dominate in terms of the grappling. Again, if Montserrat Rendon, who I don't think is very good, is able to do that to you, what is Aline Perez going to do, who's 3-1 in the UFC? And again, her wins aren't the greatest, but still, they are somewhat of names in the UFC, especially Edwards and Cutelaba. I think it's a good win for Perez here. I think she's going to be able to go out here, get takedowns effectively, and keep the fight on the ground. Zheleznyakova is primarily a kickboxer. If you get her on her back, she's not that great. So it's going to be Aline Perez to win her 4th fight in the UFC. She should be able to get it done. This is probably one of the bigger favorites on this entire card. She's a minus 260 give or take favorite against Zheleznyakova, who's coming back at you at plus 215. Yeah, give me Aline Perez to win the fight by unanimous decision. We go on to the bantamweight division. Taylor Lapilus takes on Vince Morales. Morales back in the UFC after, I believe, 1 or 2 years away from the promotion. He takes on a very tough out in his first fight back in the UFC in Taylor Lapilus. Lapilus 20-4 as a pro, 5-2 in the UFC, but 2-1 in this recent run that he has just had. A win in his last fight, I believe, was that in the Colorado card against Cody Stamann. Was it in Colorado or was it St. Louis? it was in Kentucky. I completely butchered that. But yeah, beat Cody Stamann on that Cannoneer Imavov card in Louisville, Kentucky by unanimous decision. Beat Callum Loughran in his first fight back in the UFC in France back in 2023. Dropped a fight in early 2024 in the Apex to Farid Basharat. Again, fighting the Basharats is just tough to do. I'm fine with it. Lapilus now gets Vince Morales, who is 16-7 as a pro. Did get cut from the UFC after starting his first run out 3-5. Comes into the promotion in 2018, loses to Song Yadong, beats Ayman Zahabi, loses to Benito Lopez, loses to Chris Gutierrez, beats Draco Rodriguez, beats Luis Smoka, but then drops back-to-back fights to Jonathan Martinez and Miles Johns, gets cut from the UFC, goes to XMMA, beats Teruto Ishihara by Darce choke in the second round, wins a fight in Front Street Fights in 2023, goes to Rise and wins the fight, beats Luis Guerrero and Tough Enough in 2024, and then most recently beating Hunter Azure, which I think is a very good victory by Peruvian Necktie in the third round. So Vince Morales, again, has gone places to get back in the UFC since his last fight in November of 2022. Shout out to him. Again, he's put in the work, won 5 fights outside the UFC, went to Rise and all that to come back to this spot. I believe his United Fight League, that's a Canadian promotion, isn't it? No, never mind. It was in Arizona. Anyways, still though, again, Morales has been, adamant in getting back in the UFC. He's a Syndicate MMA guy, obviously, out of Las Vegas. And again, this is going to be a second shot in the UFC, but it's just a really tough out matching him up against Taylor Lapilus. Lapilus just does a lot of things well, and he should be able to just control this fight wherever it goes. I just think Lapilus is better than Vince Morales everywhere. I think he's the better striker. I think on the ground, I understand Morales has good submissions, but I think Lapilus, if he needs to, again, can use that wrestling. But I think, again, where Lapilus wins this fight will be on the feet. Morales is a good grappler, sure. I think again, Lapilus will be able to remain competitive on the ground, too. I think he's a very decent ground fighter as well. But I think, again, Lapilus is the better striking game. Morales, where he has a chance to win this fight, will be on the ground. Again, we've seen what he's been able to do outside of the UFC. Those 2 Darce choke finishes, the one over Ishihara and XMMA, and the one over Guerrero and Tough Enough, and the Peruvian necktie against Hunter Azure for the United Fight League Championship just last month. Again, those are good wins by submission. If Lapilus is able to keep this fight standing, I think he's going to have his way in this fight, and that's what I expect this fight to be. I expect it to be Taylor Lapilus winning the fight on the feet, Vince Morales looking to get the fight down, but Lapilus able to fight that off, and I think Taylor Lapilus should be able to win this fight at home, again, in France. It's a tough out for Morales. Again, just called in about 2 weeks ago to take this fight. I understand he just fought a month ago, but he had a good 14-minute battle against Hunter Azure just 3 weeks ago. Now he's coming in to fight Taylor Lapilus, who I'm not going to say he's a high-level guy in the UFC, but definitely a top 20-ish, top 25 bantamweight in the UFC. It's just a really tough ask for Morales to come in, again, in his re-entry fight to the UFC and take on Lapilus. I'm glad Morales is back in the UFC, but I just think Lapilus is better. I like the defensive wrestling out of Lapilus. I like the striking out of Lapilus, and I think he's able to go out here and win this fight. So it can be Taylor Lapilus to win the fight by unanimous decision. As we usually do, maybe I should keep track of the French fighters on this card. Well, I guess it would just be Cornolle. I'll count Zheleznyakova because she trains in France. Does that count? I will, I guess. So the French fighters are 2-1 on this card. That's kind of a stretch to include Zheleznyakova, but she does train in France, and that's kind of the reason she's on this card. So we're going to say the French fighters are now 2-1. You can say 2-0 if you don't want to count Daria. I understand if you don't. So 2-1 go the French fighters as we go on to our next fight here in the lightweight division. Roosevelt Roberts takes on Ludovic Klein. I don't know why the UFC keeps doing this to Roosevelt Roberts. I understand, again, this is his second run in the promotion, but I don't understand why they keep giving him fights that, let's just be honest, guys, he's probably not going to win. I don't understand it. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Like, Roosevelt Roberts, again, comes back to the UFC on The Ultimate Fighter, right? The last we saw of him in the UFC prior to The Ultimate Fighter was him getting spinning back kicked in the face by Ignacio Bahamondes in the Apex in 2021. Crazy knockout with 5 seconds to go in that fight. Comes back off of The Ultimate Fighter, takes on Mateusz Rebecki in his last fight, gets submitted by first-round armbar. Again, Rebecki's last fight was absolutely horrible. I mean, we're selling our stocks on him. But anyways, right, Roberts loses to Rebecki in a fight he was a plus, 700 dog in, and more of the same in this fight against Ludovic Klein. It's just, I feel like it's a mismatch. Roosevelt Roberts hasn't won a fight in the UFC since 2020. Again, this was the first ever UFC Apex card. It was the last time Roosevelt Roberts won a fight. It was against Brock Weaver, again, in May of 2020 on the Tyron Woodley versus Gilbert Burns card, where he submitted Brock Weaver by second-round rear naked choke. Before that, his last win is Alexander Yakovlev on the Zabit Magomed Sharipov fight card against Calvin Kattar. That's how long it's been since Roosevelt Roberts has won fights in the UFC. Lost to Jim Miller, had the fight against Kevin Kroom that got overturned, and then lost to Ignacio Bahamondes. This is rough, guys. This is really rough. This is bad. Right, again, I know and I understand he won outside the UFC, but in the UFC, again, it has been tough sledding for Roosevelt Roberts. Roberts initially lost the Kevin Kroom fight, too. He got subbed in that one. Kroom was on performance-enhancing drugs, I believe. No, he's on marijuana, so that really doesn't matter. He was just smoking dope. So, again, yeah, this is bad for Roosevelt Roberts. He's losing to Kevin Kroom, but now we're going to have him fight Ludovic Klein. Ludovic Klein, who is coming off a victory. I understand this is supposed to be Nicholas Mata as well, so this is primarily just Roosevelt Roberts being a very, a company guy and taking a fight on short notice, which I respect. But man, this is rough because Klein's coming off a fight 2 fights ago where it kind of felt like this one, where he beat AJ Cunningham. It just felt like a matter of time before he finished Cunningham in the first round. He eventually TKO'd him with a body shot, beat Thiago Moises in his fight after that. 3 fights ago, Ludovic Klein beat Ignacio Bahamondes, and look where that guy is now, coming off his win at the Sphere. Klein hasn't lost a fight in the UFC since 2021. He beat Devontae Smith by split decision, beat Mason Jones by unanimous decision, had the draw to Herbert, to Jai Herbert, beat Bahamondes, beat AJ Cunningham, then beat Thiago Moises. Now you give him Roosevelt Roberts. This is brutal. This is going to be an execution. I'm sorry. Ludovic Klein is just the much better striker, and this is going to look eerie similar to his fight against AJ Cunningham. It is going to be one-way traffic in this fight. Ludovic Klein is 10 times the striker Roosevelt Roberts is. Roberts is a guy who's 12-4 professionally, but in the UFC, again, he has not seen all that much success, at least recently. Again, we just went over it. The guy's last win in the UFC was on the first ever UFC Apex card against Brock Weaver. Yeah, give me Ludovic Klein to win the fight by first round knockout. This should be easy sledding for him. Again, no French fighter in this fight, so there's still 2-1 on the card. But yeah, this is all Ludovic Klein all day long against Roosevelt Roberts, whose nickname is the Predator. So yeah, give me Ludovic Klein to win the fight by first round knockout. That's not a hot take at all. As we go on to our next one here, another huge favorite in the light heavyweight division. We've got Umar Sy taking on Da Woon Jung. Umar Sy's undefeated. He's 10-0. He is from France. That's why he's on this card again. But Umar Sy is 1-0 in the UFC with his first win back in May of this year over Tuco Tacos. I always butcher that guy's name. He's fighting later this year against, oh God, who is he fighting? He's fighting Navajo Sterling, who just won the Contender series. But anyways, it was a dominant performance for Umar Sy. Did exactly what he needed to. Got a takedown and immediately took the back and won the fight by rear naked choke. I mean, again, it was a takedown right off the jump, and it was just, again, it was just eventuality in that fight. It was a matter of time before Umar Sy won the fight, and that's what happened. He's getting a step up in this one. Da Woon Jung is, I wouldn't say a difficult guy because he's lost 3 in a row, but he's a huge light heavyweight. He's 6'4". Same with Umar Sy, so it's really not going to make a difference for him. But he's taken on another big light heavyweight in Da Woon Jung, but a guy that has not won a fight since 2021, where he actually looked better than ever did Da Woon Jung against Kenny Nzechukwu. I remember watching that fight, and it was just constant elbows after elbows after elbows for Da Woon Jung. He backed up Kenny Nzechukwu up against the fence and just unloaded on the guy, and Da Woon Jung won the fight by knockout, but since then he hasn't won a fight. Lost to Dustin Jacoby after that by knockout in the first round, lost to Devin Clark, got submitted by Carlos Ulberg. The kickboxer Carlos Ulberg submitted him in the third round late in that fight. And now Da Woon Jung is probably on the brink of being cut if he loses this fight to Umar Sy. And that's kind of why he's here, because he's the guy who's going to get obliterated on Saturday against the hometown guy in Sy who's undefeated. That kind of feels where this fight is headed, right? I mean, there's a reason, again, the UFC put Da Woon Jung in this spot because they think he can lose. And Da Woon Jung's a guy who has been finished in the feet and on the ground. I think, again, Umar Sy has a clear advantage grappling-wise in this fight. Umar Sy, again, won his first fight by first round submission. Carlos Ulberg was able to submit Da Woon Jung. I understand that was kind of an exhaustion choke too, but still, Umar Sy should have his way on the ground in this fight, and he should have his way on the feet too. I think, again, it's any way Umar Sy wants it. I think the tougher route definitely will be striking with Da Woon Jung, because, again, I will always remember that fight against Nzechukwu that he had, and that's when, again, Nzechukwu had a little bit of hype on him. That's before Nzechukwu lost to Ovin St. Preux, so that's when we were still kind of high on Nzechukwu. But again, I wouldn't, if I'm Umar Sy, I'm taking the path of least resistance, and that's through the grappling, of course. I mean, it should be there for him in this fight. Da Woon Jung, again, has lost fights in the ground before. He's lost 2 of them before in his professional MMA career. I understand he's at 21 fights, but still, again, why strike with this guy and the potential of you getting knocked out if you could just go in here and shoot a takedown, get to the back, and submit this guy? I think that's where Umar Sy wins this fight. Training at a Bulgarian top team by way of Paris, France. Yeah, give me Umar Sy to win this fight again, and we're taking the French fighter again. We're taking the French fighter at home. Umar Sy will win this fight in the light heavyweight division by first round submission. Again, if you don't want to count Daria Zheleznyakova, the French fighters are 3-0 on this card, and it should again be a victory here for Umar Sy. If you want to count Zheleznyakova, they're 3-1, but still, Umar Sy wins the fight. Maybe for the purpose of the French fighters, we'll say they're 3-0. Umar Sy gets it done by first round submission. Again, he is by far the superior grappler. He is the stronger guy, I think, in here as well. And I think, he's just got more skills to beat Da Woon Jung than Da Woon Jung has to beat him. So give me Umar Sy to win the fight by first round submission. As we go on to our prelim headliner here, Ion Cutelaba takes on Ivan Erslan in this fight. Very interesting one. Someone's getting knocked out. That's whatever the under is on this fight, it probably will hit. Because that's kind of how Ion Cutelaba fights. And you're getting a guy in Ivan Erslan who is going to be more than, willing to engage in that same style of fight with Ion Cutelaba, right? Erslan's a guy coming in from KSW, which is one of the best, best promotions in Europe you can come from, making your way into the UFC. How that's where, again, Rodriguez Duplessis came from. Roberto Soldic is from KSW as well, right? Like, it's a very good promotion. And Erslan, as a whole, went 4-3 in KSW, but against not bad guys as well. He's taken on the best guys in KSW, which I'm fine with, considering I don't know how well Ion Cutelaba would do against some of these guys in KSW as well. Cutelaba has lost 4 out of his last 5 fights, the only win being over Tanner Boser. Right, the losses: Felipe Lins by unanimous decision. The loss to Kennedy and Nzechukwu. Johnny Walker submitted him, and then Ryan Spann submitted him as well. Again, what Cutelaba's, kryptonite, I guess, of sorts has been in the UFC has been fighters taking him down. Will Ivan Erslan do that? That's not really what he does. It's not what he does. I mean, I have seen fights before where he is, where he's been shot on, but he's not really going to be the guy that's going to shoot takedowns, at least out of the couple KSW fights I've watched with him. He hasn't been the one to do that. Again, some of his KSW fights are very quick. I mean, his last win was 54 seconds, right? But that's really not what I'm expecting Erslan to do. I'm expecting a striking battle in this one. And Cutelaba has been chinned multiple times, right? Again, he has, the bad part in his game is his grappling, obviously, right? But there is going to be no threat at that. So that's why this fight's going to be fun. And that's why they match these two guys up. Because, again, it also is it's going to see how good Ivan Erslan really is. Because, again, first fight in the UFC against a guy in Cutelaba who at one point in time was in the top 15, obviously now nowhere close to the top 15 now, was in a UFC main event at one point in time, yes, against Kennedy and Nzechukwu back in 2022, originally supposed to be Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak, turned into Kenny and Nzechukwu and Ion Cutelaba in the main event at the final hour. But I don't know. Cutelaba, he just hasn't looked great recently. It's not like he's fallen over, he's fallen off, he's over the hill. He's only 30 years old. It's just guys have figured out ways to beat Ion Cutelaba. But again, this is a fight that there is going to be no threat of the grappling and no threat of the takedown either. Because even in the Felipe Lins fight, right, Lins was threatening takedowns, and at the same time, Lins was winning on the feet too. But again, we say this all the time, your grappling makes your striking better. And Felipe Lins at least created the threat of the takedown in that fight. It always affects you. Again, it just affects how you fight. Ion Cutelaba is expecting a takedown. Hands are down. Boom. That's how Felipe Lins is able to catch him on the feet. And that's how Felipe Lins is able to win exchanges on the feet as well. We will see if Erslan at least threatens that, because it would be a great idea for him to do, considering, again, that's how Cutelaba has lost and lost a lot to in the UFC. I think Erslan actually wins the fight. I'm taking him to win in his UFC debut. He is an underdog in this one, but I am taking him to knock out Ion Cutelaba in the first round. I understand, again, it's hard to do that to Ion Cutelaba. It is. But Cutelaba at the same time, how demoralized is this guy? He's lost 4 out of 5 fights, and he's fighting a guy making his UFC debut. Right, Ion Cutelaba at one point was fighting Magomed Ankalaev, he was fighting Ryan Spann, he was fighting Johnny Walker in the top 15, he was fighting Kenny and Nzechukwu in main events. and now you're on the prelims of a France card against a guy making their UFC debut and a guy who's going to be more than willing to engage in a firefight with you. And I'm not saying Ion Cutelaba is going to back down, because he's not going to. He's going to go in there and he's going to trade back and forth with Ivan Erslan, but I just think Erslan's slightly better. I think Erslan's going to catch Cutelaba before Cutelaba lands on him. It's kind of, again, reminiscent of the fights against Magomed Ankalaev. He lost both of those, especially in the first fight in Norfolk, Virginia, where Cutelaba, again, and Ankalaev just threw down, and Cutelaba was getting tagged, but he did his whole thing where, oh, I got hit, and I'm gonna fake like I'm knocked out, and then boom, I'm gonna catch you with the big right. He lost the rematch, it's fine, but that's kind of, last time Cutelaba got in these, back and forth wars in the feet, because some of these other guys haven't really been willing to engage in that, because there's just so much of an easier pathway to beat him. And again, if Magomed Ankalaev took that easier pathway to beat him, he would have done the same exact thing these other guys are doing to Cutelaba on the ground. I do want to mention, it is interesting, Cutelaba has beat Khalil Rountree Jr. in the past, back in 2019. But again, Hadias Ibrahimov beat Khalil Rountree Jr. as well, and Khalil Rountree Jr. on our next card next week is fighting for the UFC championship because of his win over Anthony Smith. And people wanted to call me crazy for saying if Anthony Smith won literally one fight at 205, he'd be fighting for a belt. I want to make that very clear, real quick. The pick's Ivan Erslan. He's going to win the fight by first round knockout. I'm going to go on a slight tangent right now. I kept trying to tell people, if Anthony Smith beat Khalil Rountree Jr., he would have fought for the world championship. He would have been coming off a win over Ryan Spann. He would have beat Khalil Rountree Jr. He would have fought for the belt. And then he beat Vitor Petrino, okay, a guy who he went to Brazil, beat a ranked guy who's never lost before, beat Petrino. And then I said if he beat Roman Dolidze, there's a good chance he'd be fighting for the belt after that too. Well, he lost to Dolidze. And again, I'm not defending Anthony Smith at all. I'm just saying that's how the UFC thinks, guys. Anthony Smith was that close to actually getting his fight with Pereira. And he's not going to beat Dominic Reyes in December. But if he does, I'm just saying, guys, the UFC would love to make that fight. They would. Because, trust me, Alex Pereira knocking out Anthony Smith would be on his highlight reel to the end of time. I'm just saying. Anyways, Khalil Rountree Jr. lost to Ion Cutelaba, but Ion Cutelaba is going to lose to Ivan Erslan. Make sure to join us next week for our UFC 307 predictions from Salt Lake City, Utah. But let's go on now to the main card. We start things off with Ziam taking on Matt Frevola. So again, it's been a never-ending campaign, and it's been a relentless campaign for Matt Frevola, at least on Twitter, to try to get on this France card, and shout out to him. He got the fight. I don't think Ziam's that good. I'm going to outright say it. I don't think he is. He's won 3 fights in a row, but the guys he's beat are just like, okay, he beat Claudio Puelles by split decision, and Claudio Puelles can't strike. I might have a chance. I literally might have a chance of beating Claudio Puelles in a striking fight. Actually, I probably wouldn't, but no. If Claudio Puelles isn't cutting weight, I'm they're probably the same size as Claudio Puelles too. Yeah, I wouldn't beat Claudio Puelles in maybe. The guy's horrible striking-wise. Anyways, that's besides the point. Ziam outstruck Claudio Puelles. That's not that big of a deal. He was able to, for the most part, stay off his backings. Puelles is going to just a boring grappler who's going to try to take you down, try to lay on you for 15 minutes. I'm fine with Ziam getting the nod in that one. Ziam was the fighter actually trying to do damage in that fight. Claudio Puelles was, wasn't even looking for submissions in that fight. He was just looking to stay on top of the guy. It is what it is, right? Before that, for Ziam, he beat Jai Herbert. Close fight on the feet. It's all right, whatever. Jai Herbert's never been the best fighter. He's just been a guy who's going to give you really fun fights, right? Black Country Banger, that's his nickname. Again, it's fun fights that's what Jai Herbert is, fun fights. Ziam beat Michael Figlock. I don't care about that fight. If Figlock's not the greatest, he beat him by decision. Okay, before that, Ziam lost by first-round submission to Terrence McKinney. He beat Luigi Vendarimni, who's not very good. And then he beat Jamie Malarkey, who is just... It depends what Jamie Malarkey you get sometimes, and sometimes it's very bad, right? And in his first fight in the UFC, Ziam was a loss now to the PFL Zone Don Madge. That's Ziam's UFC run. He's 5-2, but it feels like a real padded 5-2, doesn't it? And we're going to get to a padded record soon in the UFC, at least in William Gomis. We're going to get to that very soon. But yeah, I feel like Ziam hasn't really fought that many good guys, but he's 5-2 in the UFC. He gets a guy who has been on the cusp of the rankings before, right? I believe his fight against Benoit Saint-Denis, I believe for Frevola, was like 16 versus 17 winner gets in the rankings. And yeah, Frevola's last fight last November, he got knocked out against Benoit Saint-Denis. Saint-Denis knocked him out in 91 seconds with a head kick. But again, Benoit Saint-Denis in the main event of this card. He fought Dustin Poirier, and we're going to get to Benoit eventually, obviously, right? But I don't think that's a horrible loss by any stretch of the imagination for Frevola. Frevola losing to Benoit Saint-Denis. That's fine. Before that, his biggest win of his career, knocking out Drew Dober in the first round. I cannot say how much of a huge victory that is. I understand Drew Dober at points can be a little chinny, but that was a huge victory for Matt Frevola to go out and get. He beat Otman Azaitar before that, beat Genaro Valdez. Those are guys, again, who are decent strikers, but just guys who aren't as good striking-wise as Matt Frevola. Frevola's losses in the UFC are just all really good guys. I'm not going to talk about Marco Polo Reyes back in January of 2018. We're looking at Arman Tsarukyan, Terrence McKinney. Okay, well, Terrence McKinney has his fights where he's really good, and he has his fights where he just gets chinned. That was McKinney's first fight in the UFC where he knocked out Frevola in 7 seconds. I'm willing to put that one away, right? But Frevola's losses are 7 seconds to McKinney, Arman Tsarukyan, and Benoit Saint-Denis. And oh, by the way, he took the Tsarukyan fight on like literally 24 hours notice when they had to flip the fights on that Conor Poirier card at UFC 257. I believe someone missed weight. Was that the Otman Azaitar potato scandal? It was. It definitely wasn't potatoes, but that's what the camp said it was. That Otman Azaitar was trying to shuffle in potatoes into the fighter hotel in Abu Dhabi. That's what they tried to tell us. Anyways, again, Matt Frevola ended up fighting Otman Azaitar in 2022. He knocked him out in the first round. Azaitar looked horrible, and Azaitar has looked horrible ever since, again, the potato incident. But anyways, Frevola should beat Ziam here, right? Like, everything in this fight screams to me a Matt Frevola victory. Ziam doesn't wrestle all that much, and he's not, again, crazy. He's like, his wrestling does not blow me away. You're gonna see primarily a striking fight, and in a striking fight, I think Matt Frevola is 10 times better than Ziam. I really don't think this fight's all that competitive. The line is where it is. They're about even. I think Matt Frevola, seriously, all day long in this fight, I think he's 10 times better than Ziam. What does Ziam do better than Frevola? I mean, maybe, again, technically sound-wise, he's a better striker, but Frevola's got the power. Frevola, I think, is quicker, too. Maybe Frevola's chin's not as good. I'll give you that, because Frevola has been, KO'd very quickly in back-to-back fights, but at the same time, Ziam doesn't knock anybody out. So what are we doing here, right? Ziam has not won by knockout so far in the UFC. I don't think he's got the power to put away Matt Frevola. And I don't think, again, he's able to just outclass Frevola for 15 minutes, because if the fight does go 15 minutes, I think Matt Frevola is just going to knock him out before that happens. So give me Matt Frevola to win the fight. I like him to win this fight by first round knockout. He's just the better fighter, and he's the better striker as well. Give me him to beat Killcliff FC's own and Ziam. But again, the fighter coming out of France, I am taking the American Frevola to beat the Frenchman in Ziam, sending the French to 3-2 on this card. Again, if you don't want to count Zheleznyakova, they're 3-1. But yeah, give me Matt Frevola to hand France their first true loss of this card as we go on to the featherweight division here. Morgan Charriere, however you want to say it, takes on Gabriel Miranda. This is a levels fight. That's how I'm going to put this one. And it's obvious, again, because Morgan Charriere is a minus 550 favorite. Again, he's expected to win this fight. It's in France. Charriere's record, you can look at and, he's 19-10. He's 19-10-1. But look at the guys he's fought over in Cage Warriors. He's fought some really good guys, and then some of his losses just come back like in 2015 in various regional promotions. When you look at what Charriere has done recently, it's been very impressive, and it's been very good victories, right? So far in the UFC, 1-1. The first fight in the UFC is a TKO win over Manolo Zinchenny. Has Zinchenny fought in the UFC since? I don't think I've heard his name since then. No, he hasn't. I don't know where this guy is. After that, though, he loses to Shepe Mariscal by split decision. Close fight. I thought Charriere won the fight, I'll be honest with you. I thought he did enough. I don't know. It's a close fight. I had rounds 1 and 2 for Morgan Charriere. I just didn't think Shepe Mariscal did much with the takedown in the first round. I don't know. I can see, though, why Shepe Mariscal wins the fight. It's very close. I'll be honest. I can see it. But you look at what Morgan Charriere does in his first fight in the UFC against Manolo Zinchenny. Again, it's just pure domination striking-wise. I would expect more of the same in this fight. Gabriel Miranda is a sitting duck on the feet. That's just what he is. He is a sitting duck on the feet. If you don't get taken down by this guy, if you don't get taken down by this guy, you're going to knock him out, right? His last fight, he beat Shane Young by first round submission by rear naked choke. Well, Shane Young, guys, was 2-4 in the UFC up into that point. His wins were Rolando Dye and Austin Arnett. I don't even remember talking about a Shane Young and Gabriel Miranda fight. Well, I got it right. Miranda by first round submission. But guys, I don't even remember that fight happening. I'll be honest with you. I really don't. Now, I think that fight was happening at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, No, I'm thinking of a different fight. I don't know. I was going to say, I thought this fight was happening during the 49ers-Packers playoff game, but no, definitely wasn't. This is in September. I'm thinking of the other Strickland card against Duplessis. Anyways, regardless, I barely remember that fight happened. But again, Miranda, he's not a good striker. He fought Benoit Saint-Denis in his UFC debut, and Benoit Saint-Denis mopped the floor with him. He knocked him down 3 times, and again, Miranda is just a sitting duck on the feet, and that should be the obvious game plan for Charriere in this fight. If you keep the fight standing, you're gonna win it, and that's what I expect this fight to be. I don't expect this fight being all that close. Again, this is a fight that is set up for Charriere to win. It's in France. And again, the French fighters are 3-2/3-1 in this card. They're going to go get their 4th victory with a Morgan Charriere win by first round knockout. He is just levels ahead of Gabriel Miranda. Miranda is not a good striker. Once again, Charriere stuffs 1 or 2 takedowns. This fight is over because that's all Miranda has to offer him in this fight. Other than that, again, Morgan Charriere, he'll be able to work the body really well, be able to use his kicks. Charriere is a very good kickboxer. He's only 28 years old, really just hitting his prime now. And also, by the way, Miranda's 34, which, again, it's not horrible, but, like, again, you're starting to reach the end of your prime, the end of your peak at 34, especially in the featherweight division. This is not, again, a light heavyweight or heavyweight where you can be champion at 34 years old, or at least make a title push at 34 years old. Miranda's 1-1 in the UFC at 34. Charriere, again, 28 years old. He's the much younger fighter. He's the much more efficient fighter striking-wise. As long as he doesn't end up on his back, he should be fine. And even if he does end up on his back, I am still okay with it. I think Charriere should be able to at least not get submitted and get to the end of the round and find a way back up. But again, Miranda's jiu-jitsu is really good. His wrestling leaves some to be desired as well. I just don't see how Miranda gets this fight on the ground, and that's why, again, Morgan Charriere is going to win the fight and do it pretty easily. Give me Charriere to win the fight by first round knockout. We go on to our next one here in the welterweight division. We have got Kevin Jousset taking on Brian Battle. This is another one of these fights when I just look at it, I feel like, again, Brian Battle should just win this fight. Like, immediately when I saw this fight being scheduled, I was like, all right, Brian Battle's going to win this. I don't think it was that hot of a take to say that too, because Jousset's wins are Kiefer Crosby and Song Ki-nan, but I just feel like, again, Brian Battle has fought way better guys in the UFC and looked really good, again, against way better guys. His only loss in the UFC is to Hanat Fakhretdinov, who is a very good fighter in his own right, and again, Hanat had his, little mix-ups in that fight against Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos, and he had a very boring yet close win over Nicholas Dalby in his last fight. We'll see what happens in Hanat's next fight against Nurulson Ruzbayev next month at UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. But regardless of that, Brian Battle's only losses to him. Right, his wins in the UFC, Gilbert Urbina for the Ultimate Fighter Championship, and then Tresean Gore again after, beat Takashi Sada by head kick in the first round, knocked out Gabe Green in a fight where Gabe Green decided, my game plan is, all right, I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to knock you out, head down, and then boom, get cracked in the chin with a right hook. And then after that, for Brian Battle, beat AJ Fletcher. He was on his way to beating Angelosa, but then Angelosa didn't want to fight after an eye poke that barely poked his eye. That he definitely was fine after, but it is what it is, right? Brian Battle now gets Kevin Jousset in this fight. Jousset didn't look bad, I'll be honest, in his win over Song Ki-nan, right? The output's there, 134 significant strikes in that fight for Jousset. Really turns it up on Song Ki-nan in that one. Beat Kiefer Crosby before that by rear naked choke by submission in the first, which, again, another good win for him. I just think Brian Battle's better everywhere. I remember when Brian Battle came into the UFC, or at least on The Ultimate Fighter, they really hyped this guy up as, again, his nickname was Pooh Bear at the time. Now he's changed to The Butcher, which I think is a much better nickname, at least for mixed martial arts. Well, even though, they did make that Winnie the Pooh horror movie a couple years ago. I remember that was ridiculous. I didn't actually watch it, but I heard it was pretty stupid. Anyways, Brian Battle, they really marketed him as a very good grappler who is, should be able to win the fight on the ground if he can get it there, at least into the Ultimate Fighter. And that's what he did. He beat the favorite on that season, Andre Petrosky, submitted him with a ninja choke in the second round, which is just a modified Darce. But anyways, ninja choke, that's a... Yeah. He beat Urbina after that rear naked choke. Again, he beat everyone on that season. Beat Petrosky, Urbina, Tresean Gore. The 3 guys who ended up in the UFC on that season in the Ultimate Fighter, Brian Battle beat, right? I just think he's better. And again, he was marketed coming into the UFC as a really good grappler, a really good jiu-jitsu player, but his striking has just continued to evolve and continued to improve since he got into the UFC. Again, the Sato win, the Gabe Green win, and he's still able to get takedowns. He's still able to get submissions as well, like he did in the AJ Fletcher fight. He was out striking Angelusa. He was on his way to beating Angelusa because, again, what Angelusa does, he's really good the first 2 rounds, and he really starts to fall off a cliff in the 3rd round. So if you're able to beat Angelusa early, you're likely going to win the fight. And Angelusa knew that. That's why he backed out of the fight after the eye poke happened. But it is what it is. I just think Brian Battle is so much better than Kevin Jousset. This guy, again, Brian Battle puts on a pace for 15 minutes, and he's also got power too. It's just an incredibly tough fight, I think, for Kevin Jousset to win. I think Battle's better on the feet. I think he's better on the ground. I understand, again, Jousset has a really high output on the feet as well, but I'm fine with that too out of Brian Battle. Brian Battle can also throw with very high volume as well. It should make for a very fun fight, but I think Brian Battle eventually will get Kevin Jousset. I think this has all the makings of being a potential fight of the night. There are some very good fights coming up, but I like Brian Battle to go out there and win this fight in a back and forth slugfest. I'm taking Brian Battle to beat Kevin Jousset by 2nd round TKO. I think he gets it done. If he has to go to the ground, he's better down there as well. But I do think the striking is where Brian Battle will at least choose to win this fight. I think he will get it done in the 2nd round by TKO. We go on to the featherweight division. We have got France's own. Oh, by the way, Kevin Jousset is a French fighter, so that sends him now to 4-3 on the card, 4-2 if you don't count Zheleznyakova. Anyways, William Gomis, another French fighter, takes on Joanderson Brito. So I mentioned it earlier. We were talking about who? Ziam. Yes, another French fighter who I thought, he had a really, I don't want to say padded, I think that was the word I used, padded UFC record, but just, he was, again, Ziam's 5-2, but it doesn't really feel like he's 5-2 in the UFC, and William Gomis is 3-0 in the UFC, but again, it doesn't feel like he's really 3-0, at least talent-wise, it doesn't feel like he's a 3-0 UFC name. It just doesn't. And again, there's a reason he's on the featured fight of this entire card against Joanderson Brito, who's a very good fighter on a 5-fight winning streak in the UFC. Who's coming off a victory over Jack Shore, too. There's a reason, again, Gomis is in this spot. But I don't know. I just don't think Gomis is very good. He's 3-0, but look at the guys he's beat. Jarno Aarons by split decision. Okay, well, what has Jarno Aarons done in the UFC? He's 1-3 in the promotions, coming off a loss to Youssef Zalal. Okay, and he barely beat him by majority decision. A split decision victory over Francis Marshall. Okay, Marshall going into that fight 7-0. Now he's 8-2. Losses to Dolgarian and Gomis in a fight where he barely beat Denis Bajuka by split decision a couple months ago. And then a Yanis Gomori victory. Well, Yanis Gomori was on the other side of the biggest, or he was the biggest underdog, one of the biggest underdogs in UFC history when he took on Peyton Talbot on International Fight Week in June. And I understand, again, that wasn't, well, it was kind of that Yanis Gomori is not very good. It was just a mismatch fight. But again, at the same time, Yanis Gomori is just not that great. So those are Gomis's wins. And again, the best victory for him, at least performance-wise, was the Yanis Gomori victory. He was able to win the fight on the feet. He was able to outstrike Gomori. And then he caught him with the body shot late in the middle of that 3rd round, ended up winning the fight by TKO. That was on the Gon Spivak card. Again, this is his 4th fight in the UFC. I cannot talk right now. This is his 4th fight in the UFC. 3 out of his 4 fights in the promotion have been in France. The only one not being the Francis Marshall victory, where he won at the UFC Apex in a fight that I don't even know if he did win that fight. I don't know. I remember I was watching that fight at a Black Bear diner. I don't know why I mentioned that, but I was, and I wasn't really watching all of it. But I kind of just assumed Marshall won the fight. When the fight was over, they gave it to Gomis. It is what it is. I don't know. Did I pick Gomis to win that fight? No, I picked Francis Marshall to win that fight. That's probably why I thought Marshall won it. I have not watched the fight since because I don't really want to, fall asleep in the middle of the day. Anyways, Gomis is taking on Joanderson Brito, and Brito's really good. He's 5-1, his only loss being his first fight in the UFC to Bill Algeo. Since then, he's beat Andre Touchy-Feely, knocked him out in the 1st round. Submitted Lucas Alexander in the 1st round through a naked choke. Knocked out TKO'd Weston Wilson in a fight where he was a huge favorite in. Submitted Jonathan Pierce with a ninja choke. Then TKO'd Jack Shore after that. It was that crazy cut on the shin of Jack Shore where literally his leg was just cut open. But Joanderson Brito was winning the fight against Jack Shore up until that point. Brito was winning on the ground. He was winning on the feet too. Joanderson Brito is really putting it together. This guy is really good for 145 pounds. He's only 29 years old. Brito's putting together a pretty good winning streak now. And again, no matter what you think of William Gomis, I don't think Gomis is all that great, but still, this is a 3-0 guy. And I understand we're talking about Gomis just like how he's just another guy on Brito's resume, which that's just what he's going to become right now. But still, that's what he is. Brito's going to beat a 3-0 guy now to go to 6-1 in the UFC. And that's pretty impressive, guys. Joanderson Brito is pretty good. his striking game, he hits very hard, he throws with all he has, and he's got a pretty good jiu-jitsu game too, and he's able to get takedowns as well. Joanderson Brithu's the complete package. This is a guy who is teetering on the top 15 of the featherweight division. The winner of this fight should be getting a fight into the top 15 next. And again, I would not expect it to be William Gomis just because, again, his wins haven't been against good guys, and they haven't been crazy, he hasn't blown anybody away in any of his fights. But again, if Gomis does beat a guy of the caliber of Joanderson Brithu, then okay, I am willing to say this guy deserves to fight in the top 15 next. But that's going to be Joanderson Brithu. He's got the power advantage, and he's going to go out there and completely take William Gomis's head off. He's going to knock the guy out in the first round, and this fight's not going to be all that competitive. What does Gomis do better than Joanderson Brithu? I'll wait. It's not striking, and I don't think it's grappling either. Joanderson Brithu is all around the better fighter than William Gomis. Joanderson Brithu should be able to win the fight, and he will win it by first round knockout. We go on to our co-main event in the middleweight division. Arguably could be the headliner, but I understand why it's not, because the names in this fight, I guess, aren't as big as Renato Moicano. I guess Moicano's got himself quite a bit of a name now in the UFC. But anyways, Moicano and Benoit Saint-Denis in all fairness. But it's Nasruddin Imavov and Brendan Allen. It's not a fight that's going to, decide the next number one contender at 185 pounds. It's just not, obviously. But it's not a bad fight. Like, again, Khamzat's going to be fighting Robert Whittaker. That's a huge fight for the middleweight division. And, not to say that the winner of this fight's on that level, but hell, the winner of this fight's going to be ranked, third in the weight class? Guys, I'll make the case. It's not going to happen, and I think I know who I want Israel Adesanya to fight next, but I'll make the case the winner of this fight should probably fight Izzy. Now, again, it's not going to happen because Brendan Allen and Nasruddin Imavov are not going to fight Israel Adesanya. They don't have the name to fight Israel Adesanya, but rankings-wise, it would make a lot of sense. Now, I don't know what Izzy's going to do next. I really don't. But if it's not Izzy, the winner of this fight should be fighting Cairo Borrajo. But I think Borrajo should get the Izzy fight, if I'm being honest. There is a man of the name of Marvin Vettori who I think is very in this picture here, especially considering Brendan Allen's fight against Marvin Vettori that happened backstage or after a PFL event, where Dana White said on Instagram, if Brendan Allen and Marvin Vettori were fighting at a PFL card, it must have been the fight of the night. Anyways, they got into a little scuffle at a casino, I believe it was in Hollywood, Florida, I think it was, or was that the Mohegan Sun? I don't know. But anyways, I think it was the Hard Rock. I don't know. Besides the point. I'll make the case that Marvin Vettori gets the Brendan Allen fight if Brendan Allen wins, or regardless of what happens in this fight, Brendan Allen should probably fight Marvin Vettori. But I will give you how I'm going to match up the middleweight division after this fight, because we have to have a prediction. Nasruddin Imavov's coming off a huge victory over Jared Cannonier. Early stoppage, yes. Was Imavov on his way to win that fight? Probably. Now, again, it was still the fourth round. Jared Cannonier could have won the fifth round, could have won the fight. But if that fight doesn't get stopped, does Imavov finish the fight in the fourth round by TKO? Maybe. But Jared Cannonier did survive that onslaught in the fifth round against Cairo Borrajo in his main event just a couple weeks ago. Again, he lost the fight, but he survived. Maybe they should have let that fight go with Cannonier versus Imavov in Louisville, Kentucky. That's fine. It didn't, though. It's whatever. Imavov now ranked fourth in the weight class. He's taking on Brendan Allen, who's coming off a fight against Chris Curtis. Full transparency, I thought Brendan Allen lost the fight. I think Chris Curtis won that one. I think the reason why Chris Curtis didn't get the fight is because he messed up his hamstring, or I think it was his hamstring at the end of the fight, where Chris Curtis appeared very hurt, but again, that was nothing that Brendan Allen did. It's just Curtis pulled something, and again, it's fine. Allen ended up winning the fight, but I thought Curtis should have won the fight. I think if he doesn't look hurt at the end of that fifth round, Chris Curtis wins the fight, and it's nothing again that Brendan Allen did. It was just some freak injury that happened to Chris Curtis at the end of the fight. I thought Chris Curtis, though, beat Brendan Allen. I thought he did. Brendan Allen did nothing with his takedowns. He didn't threaten all that much with any submissions. And in terms of striking, again, Chris Curtis was able to outstrike Brendan Allen, I thought. I thought Chris Curtis got the better of that fight. It is what it is. Brendan Allen's, again, on a huge winning streak, though. He is. He's on a big winning streak. He's not lost a fight since the first Chris Curtis fight in 2021. Beat Sam Alvey, beat Jacob Malkoun, beat Christoph Jotko, Andrea Muniz, Bruno Silva, Paul Craig, and now Chris Curtis in the rematch. So 7 straight wins for Brendan Allen. Nasruddin Imavov has not lost a fight since the Sean Strickland fight at 205 pounds in 2023. Again, since then, he had the no contest against Chris Curtis, and then back-to-back victories over Armando Lidze and Jared Cannonier. Now, I remember the reason why I picked Jared Cannonier and picked him so convincingly to beat Imavov is because I didn't think Imavov's victory against Armando Lidze was that great. He won the fight. I don't think, I wasn't, controversial to say that he beat Armando Lidze, but I didn't think he looked all that great against Lidze. Now, the majority decision is ridiculous, but still, Nasruddin Imavov didn't blow me away with that performance. Now, he looked really good in the Cannonier fight. I'm a big Jared Cannonier guy. I was pushing at the time for Jared Cannonier to fight for the world championship. But Imavov was outstriking Jared Cannonier in the second, third, and fourth rounds of that fight. The rounds that's closest, the third. At the time I scored the third round for Jared Cannonier. It's close. I'm willing to go either way on it, right? But either you have that fight 2-1 going to the fourth for Imavov or 2-1 going for Cannonier. This is why I was mad they stopped the fight early, because I thought it was going to be 2-2 going into the fifth. But it is what it is. I think 2 judges had the third for Cannonier, 1 had it for Imavov. However you score it, though, Imavov did a good job in that fight, right? He's outstriking Cannonier. Cannonier was winning in terms of wrestling, and that's where Jared was finding a lot of success. But on the feet, Imavov was doing really well against a very good striker in Jared Cannonier. And again, Cannonier is getting up there in age. He's 40 years old now, but 41 now. But again, that's a good victory for Nasruddin Imavov. I think he should be able to beat Brendan Allen here. I understand, again, Jared Cannonier had some success wrestling Imavov, but I think Imavov should be able to stay on his feet in this fight with Brendan Allen. Chris Curtis did get taken down 6 times against Brendan Allen in that fight, but Brendan Allen really never had Chris Curtis down for an extended period of time, other than, I believe, it was the third round. Brendan Allen had Chris Curtis down for a fairly, for a decent amount. But Chris Curtis had points in that fight, though, where he was really just beating up Brendan Allen on the feet, especially in that second round. He had Brendan Allen hurt quite a bit. You just go back and rewatch that fight again. I don't know how Chris Curtis doesn't get the nod in that one, but it is what it is. I truly thought Curtis got, I wouldn't say it's a robbery, but I thought he got robbed. I don't know. It is what it is. But I just don't know how Imavov, I don't know how Allen necessarily beats Imavov. I know how he does it, but I don't think he can do it. I don't think he can take down Imavov, hold Imavov down, because again, Chris Curtis was able to find his way back up to his feet multiple times in that fight. Brendan Allen wasn't really able to threaten with anything in that one either. And I think Imavov should be fine. I think Imavov's the way better striker. If Chris Curtis is beating up Brendan Allen on the feet, I would expect Nasruddin Imavov to do the same exact thing. This is a 3-round co-main event, and I think Nasruddin Imavov is going to get it done. I think he's going to overwhelm Brendan Allen on the feet. I think, again, he will be by far the better striker in this one, and I'm expecting Nasruddin Imavov to win the fight by split decision. So we're taking another French fighter in this one. It sends the French fighters to, 5-3, if I've done this right? 5-2 if we're not counting Daria. So yeah, the 5th win for the French fighters on this card. I'm taking Nasruddin Imavov to win the fight by unanimous decision. I think, again, I think we're going to get late in this fight. I think Brendan Allen's got the durability to stay in this one. I understand he's been finished twice before against Strickland and Curtis, but I don't think Imavov's going to have the power to put him away in just 3 rounds. I think Imavov, though, will be able to keep the fight standing and should be able to dust up Brendan Allen on the feet. So give me Nasruddin Imavov to win this fight. Give me MMA Factory's own. Give me the Frenchman, Nasruddin Imavov, to win in the co-main event. What do you do with the middleweight division from here, though? Obviously, Duplessis Strickland, it should happen in South Africa next year. Whitaker and Chimaev will be fighting for a championship, sure, but hear me out. I think Israel Adesanya should fight the winner of Robert Whitaker and Khamzat Chimaev. That fight's happening next month, Whitaker and Chimaev. It's already happening. Strickland's getting the next title shot. That's in February. If that's in South Dakota, if that's in South Africa, put Izzy on that card. Izzy, again, I know it's not, where Izzy's from in Africa, but it's an African fight card. I think Adesanya should be on that card, just like Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman should be on that card as well if it's the first UFC Africa card. The co-main event to Strickland and Duplessis 2 in Africa should be Adesanya versus the winner of Whitaker and Chimaev. Seriously, I think it should be. You keep them on schedule. You put them on the same exact card. They could be backups if you need to for the title fight, but that should be what happens for those guys. Imavov and Allen winner, I think, will get to fight Kyle Borjaio. If it's Brendan Allen who wins just for the beef, I would have him fight Marvin Vettori. But we're expecting Imavov to win anyway, so Imavov will go fight Kyle Borjaio, and Brendan Allen then gets to fight Marvin Vettori. I think it all works out pretty well then. And then if you want to match up some other guys, Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier, not against it. Not against it at all. But yeah, that will do it for the co-main event. Let's go on to the main event now. It is Renato Money Moicano taking on Benoit Saint-Denis in the lightweight division. So Moicano has worked his way back up after all this time, back to another UFC main event. If I remember correctly, if my memory serves me right, his last main event came in, 2019, I believe, against the Korean Zombie in Greenville, South Carolina, a card that was originally scheduled to be headlined by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Thompson couldn't make it, though, after being knocked out against Anthony Pettis, couldn't make it in time, so they just scrambled and put a Korean versus Brazilian in South Carolina. Yeah, but I believe that is Moicano's last main event. It is. Yes, he's not been back to a main event since then. And it was his second straight loss at the time. He lost to Jose Aldo before that in Brazil. Then he ended up getting the chance on Jung fight. And again, he got knocked out in 58 seconds. That's when the Zombie really, again, staked his claim as, all right, I'm back in the 145-pound division. But that's enough about the Korean Zombie. For Renato Moicano, it's actually incredible what this guy has done in terms of his career resurgence, right? I think it all really started for me, or at least when people started to take note and really how Moicano just turned everything around, was when he lost to Rafael Dos Anjos. It was supposed to be Dos Anjos versus Fiziev as the co-main event of UFC 272 on the Covington Masvidal card. Fiziev pulled out. It was Fiziev, right? If I'm not mistaken, it had to have been Fiziev. Or was it? It was not Islam, right? It was Fiziev. Was it Islam? It was Fiziev. It was Fiziev. Okay, yeah, it was Fiziev. Because the RDA was supposed to fight Masha before that, but no, it was Fiziev. Moicano loses the fight, right? He's getting beat up in that one. But he loses the first 4 rounds, but somehow he wins the 5th round after he took a beat down for the first 4, and he took the fight on short notice. It's really weird. But again, that's kind of what I thought rebuilt Moicano. Then he comes back, beats Brad Riddell, chokes him out in the first round at UFC 281, then beats Drew Dober by unanimous decision, then beats Jalen Turner after that, and here we are. Again, Dober, that was the fight where he called MMA Guru a fat pig, which I thought was pretty funny. But the Jalen Turner fight, again, was he dead to rights in the first round? Maybe if Jalen Turner wasn't, stupid, he would have won the fight. If he didn't go for his walk-off KO, maybe he would have won the fight if he just, followed up with some ground and pound. But it is what it is, right? Moicano now gets a main event spot here after winning at UFC 300. Came back again. Regardless of how stupid Jalen Turner was in that fight, Moicano fought through some adversity. He got dropped in the first round, looked like he was done. Came back in the second round, grounded Turner, did Moicano, ended up winning the fight and absolutely dominating that fight in the second round and winning it by TKO. Now he gets Benoit Saint-Denis. And yeah, this is a rough fight. It is, because Benoit is going to be at home in France. He is coming off a loss in a fight that he did have staff in, but he got knocked out by Dustin Poirier. Now, that was a fight with Dustin Poirier. I believe I got him the night of the fight at plus 180. I believe I got Dustin Poirier. I put the house on Dustin Poirier, and I won, obviously. I thought it was ridiculous. That was one of the craziest odds I've ever seen for a fight. Benoit is a minus 210 favorite over Dustin Poirier. And I understand it. Benoit beat, Ismael Bonfim, beat Thiago Moises, beat Matt Frevola, but a minus 220 favorite against the Diamond, that was kind of crazy. And again, Poirier did what I expected Poirier to do to Benoit Saint-Denis. Go rewatch my video. I kind of said how that fight was going to go. I think I said it was going to take more time. I thought Dustin was going to kind of drown him a little bit more, but I said eventually, again, Dustin's going to knock out Benoit in that fight, and that's what he did in the second round. Not to say Benoit's bad at all, right? Benoit had Poirier in some rough spots. He took Poirier down. He, again, had Poirier in some precarious situations in that fight on the ground, but again, he wasn't able to capitalize. It's a really good grappler in this fight, though, in Renato Moicano, a guy that it's not going to be easy just to take his back and be able to just, easily take this guy down and work submissions. Again, not to say Poirier is either, but it's a rough fight for Benoit, at least on the ground. But on the feet, Benoit Saint-Denis has a very sizable advantage, I do think. And trust me, I want to pick Money Moicano. I like Renato Moicano. Again, I believe in the career resurgence out of Renato Moicano, but unfortunately, I can't take Renato Moicano in this fight. I'm taking the God of War, Benoit Saint-Denis, to win the fight by first round knockout. He's at home in France. He's the superior striker, and yes, Renato does get roughed up at points in the feet, and he just keeps on fighting. He keeps on coming back. He walks through those punches at times, sure. But again, Jalen Turner had Renato Moicano beat. He just didn't follow up on it. If Benoit Saint-Denis is able to put some finishes and put some big shots into Moicano, I just think it's a really rough fight for Renato to win. With that being said as well, on the ground, Benoit Saint-Denis isn't better than Renato Moicano on the ground, but he's definitely to the point where he can remain competitive on the ground against Renato Moicano. It's not that Renato Moicano has a clear advantage grappling over Benoit Saint-Denis like he did over a guy like Jalen Turner in his fight at UFC 300. I just think, again, it's an incredibly rough fight for Renato Moicano, just stylistically, because on the ground, it's not like he has a clear advantage like he does sometimes against some of these guys. And on the feet, again, Benoit Saint-Denis is the better striker. He's got more power, and he's more technically skilled as well. Don't discredit Benoit because of his loss to Dustin Poirier. Again, Poirier is still a top 5 guy in the weight class, regardless of how you look at it, and that's not a bad loss at all for Benoit Saint-Denis. Again, running into Dustin Poirier, getting knocked out by Dustin Poirier is not the end of the world. If he's able to bounce back, which I'm expecting him to do, I think Benoit is going to be in the top 10 of the lightweight division for a very long time, and this is just his way to get back into it. Again, the UFC is kind of doing him a favor of sorts by putting him in the main event over a top 5 matchup in the middleweight division in Brendan Allen and Nasruddin Imavov. It's not like they can't main event Imavov. They just did this summer in Kentucky against Jared Cannonier. Like, they're not afraid to main event Imavov. They are just putting the promotional support and putting the promotional backing on Benoit Saint-Denis because, again, he's a fun fighter who's able to get finishes both on the feet and on the ground. He's exciting. And again, they just put him in a fight with Dustin Poirier, which was close until it wasn't, until he got knocked out, until Poirier really started throwing those big rights. But again, Benoit is willing to bring it. Even in that loss, again, he was still walking forward against Dustin Poirier, who was throwing crazy overhand rights and landing, and Benoit was still walking forward. Again, pure zombie mode, like Renato Moicano can as well. My thing, though, again, Moicano's not going to damage Benoit to the point where Benoit has to go in zombie mode like he did in his first fight against Liz Lescado Santos in Abu Dhabi, but Benoit can put Renato Moicano in zombie mode. That's just kind of, it's, you know, that's just a little stupid analogy, but still, that's kind of how I see it. Benoit is able to damage Renato Moicano on the feet. I don't think Renato Moicano is able to damage Benoit Saint-Denis on the feet. And on the ground, if Moicano has to go to a takedown, I think Benoit stuffs it, and I think Benoit is very, again, I don't know if he's better than Moicano grappling-wise, but I think he's serviceable enough and good enough to keep the fight staying and at least stay out of bad positions on the ground where Moicano's easily and obviously winning. So give me the Frenchman, Benoit Saint-Denis to win. I think that sends the French fighters to, I think, 6-4 on this card, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but 6-4, 6-3 if you don't count Zheleznyakova. Maybe 6-3? I don't know. It's something like that. Obviously, that doesn't really matter too much. It's just something we keep track of when we make these predictions, but I am taking Benoit Saint-Denis to win in the main event over Renato Moicano. So, folks, thank y'all for watching the UFC Fight Night. Moicano versus Saint-Denis full card predictions here on here from Paris, France in the Accor Arena. We'll be back next week from Salt Lake City for UFC 307. The main event, of course, Poatan Alex Pereira takes on Khalil Roundtree Jr. for the light heavyweight championship, and in the co-main event for the women's bantamweight championship, Raquel Pennington has her first defense against Juliana Pena, the former champion. Make sure to join us tomorrow for PFL Europe. Make sure to join us on Tuesday for our college football predictions. Make sure to join us on Wednesday for our NFL predictions. Folks, thank y'all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video, and make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank y'all for watching, and Mamba forever.